just not convinced that we are at the tipping point of EVs yet in India, right? So they believe that just the time has not come at all, right? And investors don't want to get into early into a space lest their companies run out of cash, right? So they typically want to get in just at the right time when a company is beginning to, industry is beginning to mature. So they want to be early enough, but not too early. There are seed stage funds like ours who've taken some bets. A bunch have taken one. We have one of the few which have taken two, like I said. But beyond that, which is the next stage, which is Series A bets, there have been negligible bets. So outside the few big ones like Ola Electric, Hero Electric, recently Magenta, there have just been no meaningful investments in the electric space at all. We were thinking this would happen in 20, but maybe COVID slowed down things. We were thinking this would happen in 21, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. And we've talked to a lot of later stage VCs to sort of understand this why. Later stage VCs in India are just not convinced that we are at the tipping point of EVs yet in India, right? So they believe that just the time has not come at all, right? And investors don't want to get into early into a space lest their companies run out of cash, right? So they typically want to get in just at the right time when a company is beginning to, industry is beginning to mature. So they want to be early enough, but not too early. So why do investors believe this, right? Investors believe this because they believe that the private sector alone in India cannot tip this over. There might be, right now, there might be one potential exception to this, which is Ola Electric is launching scooters, which could actually bring two-wheelers into the zeitgeist of the public, and they might be the tipping point, which starts making EVs go mainstream. But that's also not obvious. Generally, the belief amongst the investment community is that the government needs to have meaningful participation in this to make this happen. Now, the government intent of the last few years has been very positive, and they've talked about a whole bunch of things they've introduced. There was phase one, and there's phase two, there's now PLI, etc. But there has been a gap between thoughts and policy on paper and action. There's just not enough happened from the government side, and this we believe is imperative to the industry taking off in India, right? So I'll give you an example, and Ashish briefly talked about around charging last time around. In China, 40% of the entire charging infrastructure belongs to the government, and they set up most of it before the private players start coming in. So the initial couple of years of the entire infrastructure being set up was under the government. Once the sort of model was proven, then it moved to private sector coming in. We think that the same is required here. The government needs to make do a lot more to make this happen right now, as opposed to later. I'm also, going to present one other thought on this. I was asking my co-panelists earlier that is this like a completely pro-indigenization view here? And because I actually have a contrarian view, which is that I'm not even sure why indigenization is important at this point, right? So what's the government's objective at this point? Is it to create a new domestic industry, or is it to promote EV adoption? It seems like from the way they're putting it out that it's a combination of both, but with far more emphasis on the former, which is creating a new industry, right? I would argue that actually at this point, it's more important to create the industry, do what is right to reduce, move towards cleaner energy, towards creating just a much better environment, reducing pollution, doing our bit for climate change, et cetera, and then following that on with indigenization, right? And that there should not be any constraints put on imports, and if that's the way to go faster, then that should be done, right? So is indigenization important? Absolutely. We do want to create an industry out of it. But there have been many industries in India which have got created on the back of foreign players coming into India. Look at e-com, while Flipkart is there, but Amazon later big competitors. Look at Ola. Ola came in, but Uber set the precedents there. Look at other industries, like, for example, just look at things like social media, right? There are now lots of social media in India, Indian companies, but they got created on the back of the Facebooks and Instagrams and WhatsApp coming into India. So it is not necessary to create an industry in India and preclude and exclude exclude foreign investment or foreign participation in this. So I'm also just and I don't know what my co-panelists think, but I'm also questioning the importance or the imperative for indigenization at this point, and saying maybe there's another way to look at it and say, hey, let's let this industry get created, and at the same time, put in long-term initiatives. So PLI is a good example, right? PLI will probably play out in 5 years, but if you want stuff to go electric today, then maybe we don't need to focus on the indigenization a little bit.